Time we talked a little bit about dependency acquisition patterns in containers, but I stopped short of discussing how the chroot that eventually makes it into a Debian-based image is formed out of binary packages. So today we'll talk a little bit about the metadata that exists that lets us walk closer to the sources and some of the opportunities we have to make that a little bit easier and more complete. For supply chain security verification purposes. I put together a little script, nothing fancy. You'll find the link to the gist on the description of this video. And I put together a container image that we're going to use right away to work on. This has the script as well as an index file of buildinfo files. We'll talk about that in just a second. I'll just go ahead and download a binary package here, and I'm going to run my script on it, and I'll explain you what the output looks like. So this is hashing the file that claims to be this package name version architecture tuple. Then it's looking for build infos that match that. It found two. The first one has been signed by a key that's not known to my keyring, but that has a reference to the hash of the file. And I can go get more information about that by going to the buildinfo server. And I have another one that has the source moniker that has been signed by someone that is known to my keyring, and I have installed the Debian keyring PGP keyrings into this environment. And similarly, I have a link that I can go inspect. So when you inspect this buildinfo file, which internally looks like this, it has checksums of artifacts that were uploaded. Here's the DSC file. DSC stands for Debian Source Control. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the deb files, which are the binaries. And then it has information about the install build dependencies, which are inputs to this build. And then it even has some attestations and environment variables here at the bottom. This, by the way, is signed. What you saw is not, but you can just click here and you'll see the signed version of it. This one was signed by what looks like an ephemeral key assigned to a build. Sorry, this one's signed by a developer, but there's other ones that are ephemeral. So there's a reference here to the DSC, as I said, the Debian source control. Here's the hash for that. And there's a bunch of there's two binaries here, but none of this, as you recall the output from my script, none of this actually matched the one that I got. What happened here is that if you notice the timestamp, August 24th, 6:11, and you see this other one, which is at 6:14, this one is basically a build server that picked up the sources and built the binaries. And then this hash is the one that matches. This is the one that made it to the archive, to the repo. And this is the one that was signed by an ephemeral kind of key pair. It has, again, information on environment variables. And one thing that's missing right off the bat is the link between these two, other than that package name version architecture tuple. It's something that obviously in order for this to be built, it needed to come from sources. It's extremely likely that it was this DSC file right here, but we're not positive by just reading the build info files. So something I can do here back in my working environment is I can download the source package. And you see that there were three files downloaded. The first one being the DSC. That's enough because that one references the other two, and that one's signed as well. And what I want to do is just to make sure that that hash of the DSC file matches the one that I got from the build info, and it does. So I know that I got the same build environment here that was referenced in that build info file. Now let's talk a little bit about going upstream from here and going downstream from here. Going downstream from here, so this file that I downloaded, the binary one, contains files. These files get overlaid on disk when I install this software. And then there's checksums to these files. And this is something I can inspect. So I can actually run a regular Debian container, and I can apt update, and I can run the dpkg verify or capital B, and this will check the files installed in this system against the checksums, which means that if I do something like corrupting a file that it belongs to a package, this should report here. So I can do that. The problem is that in this build info files, I don't have actually the checksums of this file. So I don't know in a centralized server, I don't know what checksums to expect. The package itself contains those lists, and then they are also present on your file system, right? So that is one another opportunity of connecting, because when you go inspect the build logs for this package, which again are kind of separate from the build info files, you can just read this whole thing. It's just interesting for debugging purposes. It has all the output, not only of the actual build of the software, but all the packaging around it. But unfortunately, you don't get hashes of the files that were produced. You don't get them here. There might be elsewhere I'm not familiar with. If you know, please let me know. But it's not an easy traversal from this build info files to the build logs to the hashes that eventually are going to make it into the depths. So that's about going downstream from here, and that's one of the opportunities that we got. Now, what about going upstream from here? Like I said, when I downloaded the source package for this, there was a little mention here that said, hey, this package is maintained in this Git repository, and I can go visit that thing. When I go there, this is Salsa, which is a Debian GitLab instance. I definitely do see the build environment. All the sources are here. If you don't need the whole GitLab thing to browse the sources, by the way, there's the sources.debian.org site. You can just type the package name, and you can also do code searches across all of the files and whatnot. But here you are in GitLab. You can actually switch to the tag that corresponds to the version of the package that you are interested in. And several packages are maintained this way, not all of them. You can actually go to trans.debian.net. If you want information on that, on the left hand side you should have information around the build systems, the source formats, and the version control systems, as well as where specifically are these packages hosted. So that's something interesting you can do. Now, another interesting thing here is that you can look at the DSC file. I mentioned that this references the other files as well as some other important kind of metadata, but it has a link to the home page. So this is the upstream, if you will. This is where you kind of go switch to the 2.0 branch, and here's where you see the true upstream, the terminal upstream for this. It's interesting because here you can assemble a Perl URL, and you can then use this, say, for example, with OpenSSF metrics, and get some interesting potential information of security interest for this. So again, another kind of interesting upstream traversal that you can do here, but that it's not easy, and you're making kind of jumping around different systems. And if you inspect the shell script, which again is not nothing really fancy, I have to do a lot of hashing with different formats. So there's SHA-1 here, there's SHA-256. As you saw, the files in file system are MD5s. I'm doing a lot of mangling the files to extract signatures out of it so that they become kind of transparent. So there's a lot of work, and that's where a lot of the opportunity with something like transparency log could come in handy. For example, I've been splitting build info files in signature versus actual content, and submitting this to Record, so that you can do things like this. You can take a Debian developer maintainer's email address, and you can search for entries, and potentially I'm looking for ways to link entries so that I can link logs with the resulting file hashes, with build info files for the build inputs, with even earlier stages files. So if you go to the Debian tracker, lets you find information about any Debian package, you'll see the news section here. And if you notice, there's this accepted WVAR into unstable. This is what's called a change file. This is also a signed file, but it has a little bit more of that changelog flair to it. It has links to the bugs that are closed by this upload, and it has references to all these other files that are part of the upload, including that build info file. So again, this is a very valuable file to potentially split and submit to Record. So changes file, build info files, and then output of build logs that tells me the hashes of the files that were produced that are contained in the package. This could all be potentially interesting, so that all of this work in the client side at time of ingestion or time of consumption of that dependency can do these validations, so that I can have some additional information about the provenance of this. And so when you're making a chroot, whether that's with depstrap or the brew type, the bootstrap, like it's done for the Docker image, you can kind of make those type of checks. So again, I hope this was useful and informative. It's been great learning for me, and I'll keep working on several of these ideas. If you have something you particularly like to see, feel free to ping me on Twitter or elsewhere. And thanks again for watching. Take care.